Hey guys, we're going to be looking at embedded triangles today and using scale factor to find a missing side. So an embedded triangle is where there's one triangle inside of another. So when you're doing these problems, your very first job is to redraw both of those triangles. So I see that we have a little, oops, that's tiny. I see we have a little triangle right here. And then I see that we have kind of a big triangle going around that. So those are our two triangles. So I'm going to redraw those separately. So every time you do one of these problems, I expect to see them drawn separately. So I'm going to have my blue triangle. So for my blue triangle, the only side I know is really this side. So 14 plus 8 gets me to 22. So I know that side is 22. And my red triangle looks like I know this side is 14. And BC, that length is going to be 10. So our job is to figure out what x is. So x is this side of my blue triangle. So once your two triangles are drawn separately, our job is to use a scale factor. So for scale factor, it looks like I know the same side. I know 22 and 14. Those are corresponding sides of the same side in both the blue and the red triangle. So you're going to need a calculator for this. If you don't have one, pause the video and get one out, please. So I'm doing 22 divided by 14. I got a long decimal, and then I'm going to do 14 divided by 22 to see if that's easier. Okay, so both options, when I did 22 divided by 14 or 14 divided by 22, I got a super long decimal. So that means for our scale factor, we're going to have to round. So I'm going to do 22 divided by 14 first. So I'm finding my scale factor. Okay, so I type in my calculator, I get a really long decimal. I'm going to round to 2 decimal places. So that's 1.57. Okay, and I could also do the other way. So I could do 14 divided by 22. So 14 divided by 22, I got 0.636. I'm going to round that to 0.64. So for this homework, please round to 2 decimal places. Okay, it doesn't matter which scale factor you want to pick. We had to round both of them, so either one is fine. The X is on my bigger shape, so I think I'm going to do the arrow towards the bigger shape. That'll make it easier when I'm doing my calculations. So going towards the bigger shape, I want my scale factor to be bigger than 1. So I'm going to choose this 1.57. If you chose the other scale factor of 0.64, you'd still get the right answer. So I need to do 10 times 1.57 to figure out what my x is. So 10 times 1.57. So I got 15.7 as my final answer. Okay, let's say you chose the other scale factor just for fun. So let's say you chose 0.64. So that's going towards the smaller shape. So that's times 0.64. So that means x times 0.64 would need to give me 10. So x times 0.64 would need to give me 10. So to figure this out, I know something times 0.64 gives me 10. So if I do the opposite operation, I can do 10 divided by 0.64. Let's see what we get. So I got 15.625. Okay, so if we rounded this, we get 15.63. So I got 15.63 and 15.7. I would accept both of those answers. The reason that they're a little bit different or a little bit off from one another is because we had to round our scale factors. Okay, so when you're doing your practice or your homework, if you get a tiny bit off from me, if your decimal is like 1 or 2 places different than mine, that is okay, but it should be really close. So depending on which scale factor you chose, these would be your answers. Either one is fine. Both would be considered correct. Okay. Let's look at our next one here. So here we have a picture. So it says, what is the distance across the river from stake 1 to tree 1? So stake 1 to tree 1 looks like this length right here is what we got to figure out. So first thing I need to do is draw my 2 triangles. So my little one, my red one, is going to be 80 and 120. And then my big one, my blue one, looks like the only thing that we know for sure is 160. So we're really only trying to figure out x here, this small length. So we only really need to know this small length. But to figure that out, I need to know the whole side length. So that whole side length I'm going to use as x for right now. Okay, so scale factor, so I have 80 and 160. So my options are 160 divided by 80 or 80 divided by 160. Either one of those scale factors will work. They both work out really, really nicely, so it's up to you. I think I'm going to do 80 to 160, so that's times 2. So my scale factor is times 2. All right, so to figure out x, all I have to do is 120 times 2, so it's going to give me 240. All right, so I know that this whole length is 240, but I only want to know the x part of it, so I have to do 240 minus 120, so I'm subtracting this piece off right here, subtracting that 120. So 120 feet would be my final answer. Okay, last question. So we have a submarine going down here. So it says after traveling 70 meters in its dive, the submarine is at a depth of 25 meters. What will the submarine's depth be if it continues its dive for another 110 meters? So our goal is to figure out the submarine's depth. So that would be how deep it is. So we're trying to figure out x right here. So step number 1, drawing our 2 triangles. So there's my first triangle. This looks like we have 70 and 25. And then my second triangle, this big one, I have, looks like 180 here. So I just did 70 plus 110 to get 180. And then we're trying to figure out x. So this is x right here. Okay, so for my scale factor, it looks like I need to use 70 and 180. They're on the corresponding sides. So I'm going to my calculator, dividing them, seeing if one works out nicer than the other. Okay, so both of those are getting me decimals. So we need to do this 2 times, just like we did in the first problem. So 180 divided by 70. I got 2.57. And then 70 divided by 180 gets me 0.388. So I'm going to round that to 0.39. Okay, you can use whatever scale factor you want. It doesn't matter to me. The x is in the bigger shape, so going towards the bigger shape. I know going towards the bigger shape, my scale factor is bigger than 1, so that would be 2.57. So I can do 25 times 2.57 to get that answer. So 25 times 2.57, I got 64.25. All right. Let's say you wanted to use the other scale factor, which is totally fine. So 0.39 is less than 1, so going towards the smaller shape, so times 0.39. So x times 0.39 would need to give me 25. So to solve that, I can do 25 divided by 0.39. So 25 divided by 0.39 gets me 64.1. Okay. Either of these answers are fine. If you get the black one or the purple one, either one is great. You don't need to do both, so one or the other is fine. So remember, rounding for your scale factor is going to affect your final answer. So if you have to round your scale factor, your final answer won't be exact. It's kind of a little bit of an estimate because we had to round our numbers. So even though they're both close to 64, they're a little bit different because we had to round our scale factors. So either one is fine. When you're doing embedded triangles, I expect to see 2 triangles drawn on your paper. If you need any help, please, please, please ask. There are a couple of questions on your homework and practice where you do have to round the scale factor, so let me know if you get stuck.